Hey, welcome to the Three Thinkers podcast with our first guest ever, Dina, a friend of mine from Russia that I met in China. So my name's
Hi,
Kevin. How are you doing, Dina?
I'm great. Look what I've got for you.
Wow, another postcard. I still owe you a postcard.
By the way, you should send at least one to me to Rome.
I should, yeah, I should. I. You know what? This is gonna sound bad. I had gotten my friend a gift when I was in Mexico,
Yeah.
a potter, like a vase, and I still haven't sent it to him because I don't know how to. I don't want to break it. So, anyways, but let's introduce the other two thinkers in the Three Thinkers podcast. Take it away, Erkan.
Okay, I'm Erkan. Hello, Dina.
Hi there. I think I didn't get your name. So what's your name?
It's Erkan. My name's Erkan.
Erkan. Okay, nice to meet you.
I'm Chad.
Hi there, Che.
Nice to meet you, Dean.
Oh, wow. Nice to meet you as well.
So one thing, we wanted to talk about is what it's like being Dina. What's it like in this day and age being who you are in Italy and kind of your history and where you come from.
Well, it feels weird. I mean, I've been raised I've studied the languages, and in 90s in Russia, we all believed that we're gonna be the part of the whole world. So I'm a millennial. I'm 1987 born. So I mean, I think my generation, we wanted to be the part of the world, and we didn't want war. And we studied about the Cold War. We studied about the World War II. So in our mind, it was something we're supposed to be the ambassadors of peace and the ambassadors of the good Russian culture. And here we are here again. Again, the war started by my country of origin. That sucks, let's say, in this terms.
Yeah, I think also if you could give us, because to me, I think for people outside of Russia, I think there's a lot of curiosity about Russia because not a lot of people have been there. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like China in the sense that people have a lot of generalizations about both countries and kind of these cartoonish images, right? Like I think there's probably a generation or two back that when they thought of Russia, they probably thought of Stalin in like a military review, and he's like watching the soldiers march down the street, and then that same generation remembers the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War, and so
Yeah.
like, what do you think for people who have never been to your country? Maybe you could give us a snapshot of your life in Russia to kind of give people more of a full picture of what it's like to be from there and to grow up there.
I think it depends on the generation. Like, as I said before, my generation, millennials, those who are in their early 30s, we were more prepared to be the part of the world, and we studied the languages, and we were completely peaceful with the idea that we want to unite ourselves with the people from other countries, other cultures. We were a lot into American culture. We watched all those, blockbusters with Schwarzenegger and the Simpsons show, and we were listening to Nirvana and stuff like that. But what I see, like the younger Russians who are 20 years old and less than that, they were raised already in a different reality. I think that things started being changed in 2000 when I was already a teenager. And it was, becoming more close and more nationalistic. And, at schools, they were teaching kids like Great Russia, great Putin, something like that. But I was already more or less grown up personality. And for me, it's really heartbreaking in what's happening these days. And I'm definitely me and the other representatives of my generation who were not prepared to that. Actually, I came to Paris for my birthday, and my great friend, she's my age, she recently moved to Paris to work. She got a contract here. She's an architect and also the millennial person. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm just shocked, and I'm really lost. That's what I feel like. I feel very lost about what's happening in the country of my origin. And I feel like there is no way, to get back. So this country does not exist anymore in the way I used to see my country of origin. I think at some points it will just dissolve. That's my feeling. But of course, it's very, let's say, worst case scenario. But it feels like that, yeah.
Dina, I wonder, what do you think exactly has led to that change that you describe?
I still remember when I was 16 years old, like doing my high school, and an elderly lady, and she said, Putin just came to power, and she said at some points, we still had the freedom of speech back then. And she said, but kids, don't you feel like it's getting worse? I remember that. I really remember that. But I was a teenager. I wasn't those, adolescent questions, like with whom to have first sex and stuff like that. But I remember the words of that lady when she said that it's getting worse in the country where we live. I do remember that. I remember also that lots of classmates from my high school, I studied grammar school. We studied English and German languages. So it was kind of good school. Lots of them led the sing and now settled down somewhere abroad in Europe or the States as well. Because we felt that this democracy, it didn't work there somehow. I mean, when the USSR, collapsed, that system of Soviet Union collapsed, it didn't work. There was like 10 years of span when the nation, we were in that kind of decisive moment. What can we do? What should we do here? And like, I believed it's going to be the part of Europe. I thought we're going to be like European country with democratical values. That's what I expected Russia to be. But then in 2014, when the current president decided to annex the Ukrainian peninsula, Crimea territory, I realized that there will be no more democracy here. It's not just going to happen. I mean, that's how I saw that through, from my perspective. And yeah, now I see we started the war. I mean, my country started the war, the aggression towards the neighboring country with the sovereignty. And that's it, let's say, in these terms.
Dina, do you believe that Putin is actually trying to put the former Soviet Union back together in some way? Do you think he's trying to create a greater Russia? What do you think, or do you have any idea what the larger goals might be on his part?
Yeah, first of all, this gentleman, he went out of that KGB background. He, KGB himself when he was younger. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, he was in his early 40s, this gentleman. And when he took over the power after Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin, probably, when you are 40, at some points you arrive to some sort of, so maybe in his mind, this idea that there is the Soviet Union, the major empire, that we have this competition with the states, I still feel like he's following the same agenda, that there's supposed to be some sort of competition. Even the world has changed dramatically and things don't work the same way anymore, that you occupy the territory and you become stronger. We are the biggest country in the world. We have so much land and territory. And literally, I would say 90, 95, 96% of our population lives in poverty. So nothing has been done within these 20 years of his reign to develop, the life of common Russians. So I don't know, we were and we are selling gas and oil to Europe and to other countries, but the money goes just to the pockets, you know, of our oligarchs. I'm just kind of, I don't know, I feel like a bit numb of what's happening these days. And I really did not expect it's gonna get that bad as it's happening these days. I did not expect. But yeah, 2014 annexation of Crimea, it was already, you know, quite a remarkable sign that something is not working here. And I asked Kevin, he's my friend, like, I asked, what was the United Nations doing? Like, didn't they notice that something is wrong with this leader, that he's taking a wrong path with all this, you know, imperial ideas, like we are the empire, we need to grow, we need to orders. So that's a Russian question. What about the United Nations here? Like,
I think honestly, whenever it's a nuclear armed state, and you have you have a leader who you perceive could use those nuclear weapons, I think organizations like the United Nations are toothless. I mean, they're not gonna send in the United Nations blue helmets to go and get in a firefight or some sort of armed conflict with Russia. And let's be real, if Russia was trying to take a piece of Germany, the response would have been way different than Crimea. You know, Crimea is probably not on the geopolitical, you know, chessboard for, you know, the EU and the US. They probably didn't have as much concern about Crimea. But maybe because I think with Ukraine, I think it's like first the US and the EU obviously want to like deplete, and they've said they want to deplete Russia's military until they can't invade any country again. And if you think about it, I mean, Ukraine is a breadbasket of the world with millions of tons of wheat. So, you know, like, as far as I know, I don't know if Crimea is known for, you know, like, if Crimea had the biggest oil reserves on the planet, the biggest untapped oil reserves on the planet, the EU, NATO, all these organizations would have had a much different response to what happened in Crimea. I was wondering, like, how, this is a big question, and this is a long form podcast, so feel free to, like, you know, expound upon your ideas and share with us your thoughts. How did your idea and view of yourself as Russian change from, let's say, your teenage years to now? Big picture, how did it change? Like, for me, let me give you an example. I grew up in, like, suburban America, and I grew up moving around a lot. And when I looked around, I always had a curiosity about other places and going to other places, because I looked around at kind of my sterile American suburban upbringing and the people I was around, and I just thought, is this what the world's like? You know, is this cocoon really how the world is? And so that's why I went many places, you know, over time, because I just wanted to see what else was out there. But, like, how did, like, let's say, I would say definitely in my teenage years, I always had a curiosity to go abroad and go do other things, but I definitely had a little more patriotism in me, a little bit, like a little, like, maybe now my patriotism level is like 1%. Maybe back then it was like 15%. So, like, how did you evolve or change from the time you were a teenager to who you are now in relation to your national identity?
Wow. To be honest, I don't really feel Russian a lot. And it's not about the war. It's about, as I said before, since childhood, I studied the languages, and you cannot study the language without the culture. So first of all, the Anglo-Saxon culture. So we read all those English American poets, writers. Then, plus I had a German language. So I studied German language, history and culture, literature. And then I lived and worked in Asia, in China. And now I live and work in Europe, in Italy. So I don't have this identity like I'm Russian. I still feel myself the human of the world, Yeah, that's how I feel. I never felt disconnected with the people from other nationalities. Like these days, mainly I work in tourism business, and I would say 95% of my customers are American people. And among all of my colleagues who are Italian people, it's kind of obvious that for me, it's easier to find a common floor in terms of conversation with American people than to Italian people who always lived, insular on the peninsula. I mean, in this country, in Italy, because I learned a lot about your country's culture. Then I listened to the music. I read if you ask an Italian person who is Jack Kerouac, and maybe they've never heard that name before. And it's not, I'm just trying to promote myself. I'm saying that I don't really feel rushed, and it's not about the war. I think, you use the language. I communicate with my partner, who is an Italian gentleman, but mainly we use English because my English is better than my Italian. So to communicate some complicated concepts, I would stick to English. Obviously, he doesn't speak Russian. So with whomever I talk, I would stick to English language. So, but of course, I don't feel American or British because I've never lived there. But yeah, with the recent situation, I feel really sorry. I think that this war put down a lot our culture, and I just feel sorry about that. And yeah, and I feel lost. That's the main feeling, I think, being lost.
Erkan, do you have something to share? You're muted.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking, sorry about that. We often hear from like other regimes in the world, and they would say like things. So, for example, Putin invades, Ukraine, and years ago annexed Crimea, and now he invades Ukraine. And then people say that's a sovereign nation. You shouldn't be doing that, and people, people criticize. But then what you hear from the Kremlin is something like, well, look at the crimes of blah blah. Like they point to America, for instance, or to other countries. And I wonder, what do you think, about that kind of response to? I mean, is it? I mean, I think that there's there is a case that maybe the responsibility that comes with being kind of the leading figure in the free world, like the American president is, and then a succession of American presidents, as we know, have kind of led their countries into stupid wars and used kind of classic political tactics, a classic playbook to play people off against each other. And all powerful nations, I guess, do these things. But I wonder what your response would be to that kind of, is it an excuse, or what do you think about that? Do you think Putin has a point if he says, well, look at what this one did and that one did, if he points to the history?
Well, it's just like, what I see from lots of Russians I know, also the immigrants who live in Europe, they always put America, like say, look what the states have done. What have they done with Yugoslavia when they bombarded Yugoslavia, and why the states have zero sanctions? That's like, the very common question brought up in the Russian conversation. Like, why aren't we allowed to do something like that if the states were not punished for their actions? I don't know. It's quite complicated to answer this question. I don't want to tell you lies. I don't have, the pure judgment about the action of the other country. I can judge just the actions of my country of origin, because I lived there, I was born there, I was brought up there, and we had this tension with Ukraine for quite a while. I've been to Crimea when it was Ukraine, and there were Ukrainian people living there. I have Ukrainian friends from Crimea, and I remember like 2008, it was, 2008, and there were those Russians living there saying, well, it would be better if it was the part of Russia. I remember that. I think it was, it's just a mess because of this bloody Soviet Union thing. There was like this forced union of the countries. No one wanted to be the part. When in the beginning of the Second World War, Ukraine actually, they wanted to become allies with Germans because they didn't want to be the part of Soviet Union. It's also kind of historical fact. But I think through that way, they just wanted to get their sovereignty. At some points, these kind of huge unions, they don't work. That's just my feeling. But of course, I might be mistaken. But I don't blame the states, maybe because I'm one of those kind of people, as I said before, since childhood, I had a positive feeling about everything American or everything British. And through my life, I'm 35, and nothing ever negative happened to me, from American or English people or Australian or whoever else. But I had lots of, violence and negative experience in Russia from Russians. So, yeah.
I think that one thing, and this conversation goes to even what's happening in Ukraine, but there's a tendency among all of us to just talk about these things that are happening in Eastern Europe as if it's all about the US and Russia.
Yeah.
And a lot of the discussions are absent of, well, what are the neighboring countries' belief? What are the neighboring populaces' belief? Like there's obviously a competing vision of the world, right? And there's a certain amount of evil done by countries that promote both visions, right? So you have the EU, the US, Canada, the Anglosphere. You got that vision, the West, and then you have kind of the Russian Empire, and you have that version or that economic bloc. And you can include China in that. And the question is, like, what are the countries, let's say, around Russia, especially in Eastern Europe, what camp do they fall into? And if you see just by their actions, most countries in the eastern side of Europe, outside of Hungary and Belarus, those countries, because of the just from what I've read, and just from what's going on right now, I'm not an expert on it. It would seem that when it comes to the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland, that none of these countries want to be part of Putin's empire. None of them.
Yes.
And in fact, as the war in Ukraine has dragged on, countries like Slovakia, Poland, and the Baltic states have all been the most militaristic proponents of intervention in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that in the conversation, right? So we can all acknowledge America does evil things, Russia does evil things, but also we can put in the conversation, what do the neighboring countries want? And I'm not an expert on this, but it would seem that they want to be part of the Western vision, Western economic system.
What is it? Excuse me for interrupting. For example, now this particular conflict between Russia and Ukraine, what Italian people think of it, everybody blames Zelensky. They want him to give up on fighting, and they want him to capitulate and say, okay, Putin, just come and take our land, because they are scared of the nuclear, threat. And they say the more Ukrainians resist the occupation, so the threat is growing. So Italian people somehow, they believe if at some point Zelensky gives up, surrenders, so the war should be stopped. But I'm telling them, listen, guys, you remember the lesson of the World War II. What happened? The Nazis took all the territories. When one country surrendered, and then it comes like, the domino effect. So I don't think that if today Zelensky surrenders and tells, okay, take whatever you want, it's yours, I don't think Putin will stop. I'm quite sure he's going to go further. Moldova, then Poland, then Baltic countries, and so on and so forth. But
the appeasement approach, the Chamberlain approach from right before World War II, the appeasement approach, you're saying definitely would not happen, would not work. A follow-up question I kind of have about that is, I fear that the lesson that some people at least might draw from this is, if you have nukes, you need to keep them, because Ukraine at one time did have.
yes. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I think what it is this, right? The reason I like that Italian example from what you're telling us, for a lot of people, I think in Western Europe, like, since the wall only came down in 1991, the consequences of tyranny, of old school, one party state, one man rule domination is still fresh. So I think and that's why you see with like Slovakia, Czechia, the Baltic states, Poland, they've all been very hawkish, right? They've all offered to give Ukraine jets, missiles, guns, weapon systems, because I think for some of those countries, the memories of the Soviet Union are way fresher, or they're still fresh in their minds. And I think for some, it comes down to, most people don't want their lives interrupted, right? If someone's in Germany, right? Germans, for example, the leaders of Germany, right? The Merkel and the new guy Scholz, they just want that. Look, they don't want a war. They just want that oil and gas to keep pumping and keep their houses warm. They don't. I can see I think there's probably a certain number of people in Italy or Germany like, yeah, Ukraine, just throw in the towel, go along with the program. Let's keep the wheat going. Let's keep the oil pumping. Let's keep the gas going. Because deep down, many of these people, they don't want it to affect their lives, right? Which is normal. If I was in Germany, maybe part of me, if the chancellor of Germany said, look, we're not taking Russian gas anymore, and we're all going to be a little cold this winter, buy some extra blankets, get some space heaters, I might be like, there's probably some people like, man, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I don't want to be cold all winter. So, like, do you have interactions, let's say, with expats from other Eastern European countries in Italy?
Yes, one of my colleagues is a Polish, and he left Poland when it was under Soviet domination. He's, I don't know, 50-something year gentleman, very nice person. And he told me once that, in his opinion, any kind of regime, communist regime or fascist regime, is some kind of sorting the same stuff. That's what he told me.
How does he, when you talk to him, does he talk about the war in Ukraine very much, or is it not a big topic?
No, I just remember that some certain feeling when I was in Russia when the war started, and of course I got frightened a lot that maybe I won't be able to leave the country. And when I came back to Rome and I get back to office, and that Polish gentleman, when he saw me back to office, and he just gave me a strong hug, and he said, like, thanks God you're back, you're safe and sound. So I had that feeling that he felt very sorry for me and for my family, and because he understands that my parents are still in Russia, and yeah, that is not easy. Yeah, let's say in these terms. But you asked me, like you sent me the agenda, and there was the question, how do I think it's gonna stop? And no answer. I don't see the end of the war. I think it's gonna be a long, long scenario. That's my prediction. It's gonna be a new Afghanistan war, like for years and years, this kind of conflict. Of course, when I hoped that Putin, but he's still there. So
Do you think there's a breaking point for the average person in Russia, for the person who is seeing, or maybe not seeing, maybe that's part of the problem, maybe there's enough propaganda that the average Russian is not seeing just the extent of what's happening, the extent of the suffering of their own soldiers and the families of those soldiers. Do you think there is a breaking point, or do you think the propaganda is strong enough, or the fear of Putin and the regime is strong enough that people will continue to go along with it for a very long time?
you know what? How this war is displayed actually in Russian media. Mainly they tell the people there that it's the war between Russia and the states. So they always tell that the states provoked, that NATO was expanding. So it's not about the Ukraine, at least how they show inside of my country of origin, what the central media tells the people. And like my cousin, he's a military person, now retired, but completely brainwashed person. And he told me when the war started, he said like, well, Ukraine is ours. It's our territory. It should be back to us. It belongs to us. And later the president will take care of the states. I mean, in some negative way, he was saying. And that's the typical Russian person, 45-year-old, like with this mentality that we are a very strong country, we're gonna fuck them off, something like that. I think we have quite a high percentage of this kind of people. And they do not realize that they just live in complete lies. They do not realize that in modern world, the cooperation between the countries is just different. And you just cannot go and occupy someone's territory and kill people. I mean, I don't know. But I left this country almost 7 years ago. I don't live there. But every time I come to visit my parents and I see that it's getting worse and worse. I mean, there in Russia, it's getting worse. But I think people aren't educated enough to understand what's happening. That's my feeling. Those who are educated enough, they left the country. Not now. They were leaving, like me, what I've done. Like I got education, then I earned some money, and I started first China, then Europe, People are just running away, those who are able to do that. And who are not able, they keep believing that we have to fight back the states, that the states are aggressive towards us. Me, personally, I don't believe in that competition. I don't believe that there is the competition between the states and that bloody Soviet Union, whatever it is. It's just, I don't know. To me, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, I even think about how, like, even a basic kind of like gathering of basic facts, right? That, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Putin has said, right? So on one hand, he said it's about NATO. On the other hand, Putin has said to people, like, Lenin created Ukraine. It's not a
Yes.
It's not a real
Yes,
country. Like, we created Ukraine, the Ukrainian identity, and what you said, what you were saying about how you think it will continue on from Ukraine. I've seen that even some Russian generals have said, "Look, yeah, the Russian part of speaking part of Moldova, that could be next. If Poland wants problems, we can have a conflict with Poland." And to me, from what I know, just the basics about kind of Russia's economy and demographics, right? Like that the Russian population is decreasing, that
Yes.
the number of young people is going down, that the economy, some reports say it's the Russian GDP is only equal to that of the state of Texas. So to me, it's kind of like, it seems like kind of like there's so much pride involved in like, and some denial that this is kind of,
I think that's the
and again, I'm not promoting any empire or anything like that. I'm just stating kind of like the way I see it. I'm not a cheerleader for American imperialism either, but to me, it looks like the death throes of the Russian Empire. I mean, because even in Ukraine, with the number of admitted casualties from the Russian pro-Kremlin papers, the number of casualties and dead, the number of dead, the number of injured is unsustainable. There are not enough reserves. So to me, what I worry about, I mean, and we're not involved in the high level government negotiations, but I worry about a nuclear strike if it looks like the the quagmire, the long-term insurgency that America's feeling to bust up the Russian military, that could lead to a nuclear strike, like kind of a big like middle finger to everyone,
I
because
think it's
there's a point
possible.
of no return.
I think it's possible. I think
Yeah.
what you were saying is definitely
Sorry, go ahead.
possible. I think.
No, how common is it though? Like you said about your cousin, how he views Ukraine. He's like, that's part of Russia. Putin's going to
Yes.
show everyone what we're
Yeah.
about. Do you think that's a really, like, is that from the people you know, right? We can't generalize the whole country, but from the people you know, is that a common belief? Do a lot of Russians not see Ukraine as its own country?
Here I'm confused, and I cannot give you the the real data because first of all, when the war started, all the free media, the oppositioner media was shut down, and lots of journalists, they just fled the scene. Those who didn't flee the scene, they were captured, they were seized into the jails and detention and something like that. So I don't have really any kind of transparent statistics to understand how many people do support this special operation and how many people oppose that. Also, when there is any kind of statistics, I don't think it's like realistic, because when people are asked the question, do you support this kind of special operation? And people just are scared to answer. They feel fear. Like, for example, for my birthday, I opened the fundraising to support the Ukraine, and some Russian people texted me, aren't you afraid to be to get the detention if you're going back to Russia? You should not post anything about the Ukraine on your media. So I don't know, to me, something like Germany in 1930s here. I mean, not here, there in Russia. Yeah. I don't know. It's just crazy. It feels like, I mean, we didn't study the lesson, my country. We didn't really learn this material. Mhm.
So like let's go back a little bit to like, what made you decide to go live abroad? I mean, what were the factors where you decided to leave?
Well,
And then maybe if you don't mind, one thing I'd like to talk about from one of our previous discussions was
yeah.
how censorship and kind of how music and art changed within Russia from when you were young, in terms of like how much musicians, how much freedom they had to sing about what they wanted to sing about, and how much that changed since from the early 2000s to now. And but let's start first with like, what made you want to leave Russia, And then like, what was it like to be there when everything kicked off in February?
Well, yeah, I already told you in our previous, let's say, podcasts and something that my first degree, I'm a linguist, so I used to teach the language. I mean, I used to teach English language to the speakers of other languages. I mean, to Russians. At the universities, I worked at art college. I remember that was my first, last job in Russia. And I remember my students, they neglected this kind of class of English language. And of course, I was annoyed, like, why you are neglecting? Is the class is, on the list, is important. You're going to have an exam. And many students used to tell me something like, but why do we need that English language? Why do we need to study the language? And at some points, it occurred to me that they were right. Nothing was about English language in the town of my origin. We didn't have any international tourists. We didn't have any international events. We didn't have any English-speaking visitors or, business people coming. Nothing international was there, actually. No, there were some people from Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, but they didn't speak English. They were all former Soviet republics, and they were using Russian language. So the kids who studied English from me, the basics English, when I had to teach them about present simple, present progressive, all that stuff, hi, my name, blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of catharsis. I just realized, okay, what am I doing here has no use. It's just useless. My job is useless. It is low paid and no one really needs the skills. And yeah, it was quite painful. I mean, to realize that. And that's how I started looking forward, to put my endeavor, to put my energy to somewhere where it start, this kind of seed will give this fruit. That's why, I mean, it was Malta, then it was China. I got that British certificate and moved to China. When I used to teach in China, the same basics of the language is not even my mother tongue. I mean, English language. But I mean, it was fruitful there. They appreciate it. And I'm not speaking about the money just. People need it because their country, China, they had a lot of international things and business and stuff. And then the students had the money to go abroad to study. I was preparing lots of guys and girls for IELTS exam to go to Canada. But I didn't have the same students in Russia. So it was kind of really useless job I was doing inside of my country. For me, that was like why I moved. I just wanted to be the sustainable part of the world, to do something what is needed, Yeah.
I think speaking, Kevin, you're muted. Did you want to say something?
I was trying to say, Erkan, do you have some thoughts? Go ahead and share
Okay,
with us.
thanks. Yeah. I was thinking, well, what you said about like what you were saying about it's complete contrast between Russia and China in some ways, as you said, because the English-speaking market, I'm the same. I teach English, and the market for that kind of work and that kind of industry in China is huge. International students and so on. And that's just one example. But China is they're the consumers of the world, if you like. They have all the money. And that's why they're so important at holding the world economy together. But and I wonder about, what are your feelings about the way in which the world is strangling the Russian economy? And are we going too far in some ways? I believe we are. Are we going too far with all of this kind of cancelling of Russian culture, traditional stuff? And isn't it a bit hysterical what we're doing with, the works of Tchaikovsky and cancelling these kinds of, and one or two other names as well, Dostoevsky, and great works, and we're just cancelling these great works. And yeah, so that's the first bit of the question. And also, how do you see a way out of this conundrum, if you like, where we're trying to strangle the Putin regime, but obviously Russia is like any country, and it needs an economy. So what's the way around that for the world?
And we don't want to hurt the average Russian person who
Exactly,
maybe
yeah.
has no real responsibility for what's happening here.
Yeah, you're talking about, and I think that it's a bit too much, a bit too severe, let's say, what's happening. The war started, Putin, he started the war. And I know that we have the people who support this conflict. There are these people, but they do support because they do not know the whole situation. They do not have the critical vision. They have never been abroad. They are so poor. So, have you ever seen that movie, the Pink Floyd, The Wall? I mean,
No.
like, they're brainwashed. That's why they support. And I think that they will never go and fight there. It's so easy just to sit in front of the TV and say, yeah, I support that. But I don't believe the people who say I support, they would go and physically start one. I mean, and what's happening in the world, like, I live abroad in Europe and I work with Americans mainly. I spend like the whole day with American families going around Italy, and they always ask whether I'm Italian or not, and I always tell the truth that I'm Russian. No one has ever been aggressive towards me. People are understanding and they feel sorry for what's going on. So I think it's a temporary situation, and obviously it'll get better when the war is finished. But maybe I'm a bit too much negativistic, but I don't think that the war should stop fast. I don't know why. I don't feel it's gonna stop very fast. Because I mean, Ukrainians and Russians, we were the same people who managed to, fight back the Germans 80 years ago. 80 years. So the mentality is very similar. So that means that this kind of competition between us, they don't want to surrender, and us Russians, we don't want to surrender. That's why I just don't see how it could finish fast. I don't know if you get my point, what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I mean, there are so many. I mean, there's so many Ukrainians in Russia. There are so many Russians in Ukraine. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we were marrying each other. Like my friend Christina, she's here in Paris. She works here. She's from Kiev, Ukraine. Her mother is Ukrainian and the father is Russian. So she's like 50-50. And it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy.
This part of the conversation really makes me think of, I was reading Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. And he wrote about how in 1957, there was this great anthropologist, Sharif. The guy's name is Muzaffar Sharif, I think he was called. And he took a group of 22, I think, 12-year-old boys to a park in Oklahoma and to conduct an experiment. And it became one of the great studies in morality, in human morality. And what he did was he had these two groups of boys, and they formed, like, it makes me think about nationhood and these kinds of things, how identities form and moral systems. And these boys, they were like some sort of, like a bit like Cub Scouts or something like that. And this was an experiment in a kind of an experiment in social psychology. And the boys, when they got to the park, they started marking out territory, giving themselves a name, like a gang, and straight away they were doing these kinds of things. And then they didn't know that each other was there. One group of 11 didn't know that the other group of 11 was there. And then when they found things like paper cups on the floor when they visited the pond or something like that. They got really angry because some outsiders were messing around on their territory and leaving litter. And anyway, and then so the Sharif, this Sharif guy, he gave them the opportunity to come into contact with each other, and that so they got to know that each other was there. And then they became even more tribal and started making weapons, and they would have come to blows with each other had it not been for the intervention of Sharif. But we don't have a global Sharif. We don't have an alien civilization or a god who can intervene and say, you know, stop the fighting now, you know, like the day the earth stood still or something, you know, where the aliens come down. But it's just an interesting thing that, you know, we don't have that teacher, that authority figure who can, that referee who can stand in the middle and say, you know, cut it out.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, but people gravitate to this kind of identity and this kind of group cohesion, and this is all part of morality. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a lecturer, and he was talking about how most states are only a couple of hundred years old, which I knew anyway, or we were talking about it. Most nation states are not that old really, but that doesn't make it right what Putin has done. You know, you may not agree with the concept of the nation state or whatever. You may not agree with these kinds of ideas, these concepts, and maybe they give rise, they facilitate things like xenophobia and hostility, but it doesn't make it right. You know, it makes me think. Yeah, that was just a comment, really. I mean, Kevin.
No,
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I wanted to say too, it's like somewhat people, I think people can function like those young boys that are functioning as a tribe. It's like, what if there was this doesn't exist, but let's pretend there was like a chain of islands with 100,000 people on them, and they might not know even the terms nation state, but they might be functioning as a nation state without even knowing what that means. So maybe, you know, like for example, people can look back at the history of certain countries and be like, okay, there was a national identity there, they just hadn't tapped into it, or they didn't really. The other thing that I think is that this war has shown is how really mastering social media in the digital age can change the world's opinion, or even, like, for example, like Zelensky and the Ukrainian regime, they're very good at social media. They're very good at making videos and portraying a very powerful image. And it's probably from his training as an actor, and he's got writers and stuff like that. But that has swayed a lot of people here in the States, you know, like the most powerful country in the world, to being, there's so many people I know who know who Zelensky is. And the number of world leaders that most Americans know is very, very small. So to encounter so many people who know the name of the Ukrainian president, I mean, that's a big thing, because, you know, I guarantee if you ask Americans who's the leader of Germany, I think there's probably less Americans who know who the chancellor of Germany is than know who Zelensky is. Like, you could just say Zelensky, who's Zelensky? You don't even have to say his first name and people will know. And it's the power of social media, right? That's the other thing to me that makes this look like the kind of the old school approach, right? Like Putin obviously, Putin and his buddies, they don't give a shit about social media. They don't care about splicing together some powerful propaganda videos or giving some powerful speech. Like, Putin's not like, hey, let me talk to the EU. I want to talk to them. Give me a chance to say my piece. He doesn't care. But in this day and age, that stuff does matter, right? I mean, that stuff does matter. And then, so anyways.
He's an old school leader. He doesn't use a cell phone, you know? Putin doesn't use a cell phone. He doesn't use a cell phone.
How does he communicate? I mean, I wonder how, I mean, the other thing is, like, here's the other thing I think about. Putin is bad, right?
Yeah.
The other thing though is, like, you know, they say there's some reports that say Putin is sick. some reports say he has Parkinson's or he has cancer or whatever. But here's my thought: is like, let's say Putin goes, Putin dies. Who's next? Is it someone who's even a bigger ultranationalist? Is it someone in the military who's more like militaristic? You know, like it's not guaranteed that the person after Putin is going to be like a rational actor on the national stage. It could be a military junta who takes over and says, you know what, Putin didn't go far enough. We're going to do whatever we want to do.
Somehow I expect it's just going to be someone similar to him, someone from his background, you know.
Like a KGB agent or like a...
We don't have any opposition. You know, all the oppositioners are in jail or killed. So we just don't have those anymore. I mean, Navalny is forever in jail, and most likely they will just kill him there. I think so. That's what I expect to happen.
Maybe, there's just something else too. Maybe you could tell us about Navalny and who he is, and like how important is he to people who are kind of in the opposition or who don't like Putin, like yourself. Like what is Navalny's background? What does he represent to you?
First of all, he was just a journalist, and then he created that kind of party. They were making investigations about corruption. So his party was called like the fund of something like fund of about corruption. I don't really remember the abbreviation meaning. Anyway, he was making lots of investigations about the corruption in our government, and quite interesting things he was doing for years, for more than a decade. Then I think 2014 he wanted to ballot for the president, but they kicked him off and they said that he was a criminal and blah 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 blah. And I don't think he's a very important figure actually for an average Russian. Average Russian people, they don't support him, they don't know much about him, and again, it's all about the information. And because I don't know why lots of people, they just don't use the internet, they don't want to analyze, they just watch the television and they follow what is told there on the TV. Here I don't have an answer. Why is it like that? Maybe by the way, it's because of that bloody Soviet Union, because the people, they had an idea that the government takes care of us, we just have to follow what the government tells us. I'm just guessing. I think maybe it's because of that crazy, let's say it's been 70 years there, that Soviet Union thing, when people were told what they have to do, where they have to go, what time, I'm just getting.
And the trade-off perhaps there, as you were kind of alluding to, is how life is going to be, what to expect, what the rules are, and what to do to be taken care of at a level that feels comfortable to you.
I think, yeah. I think so.
I wanted to go back to something you and I talked about, because we're all very interested in the arts here and music and books. And I wonder if you could tell us how censorship related to music and artistic expression has changed from, like, let's say the 2000s to now. And I remember, for example, I remember the example you gave me when I came on your program was, I forget the name of the band, but there was a band, it was a duo, and maybe I thought that seemed like a good example of what you were talking about, how things have changed.
Yeah, there was that band which actually became world famous, and they also had I think they made one CD in the States and somewhere in California. That was the band named Tattoo, as a tattoo. There were two girls and they were performing like a lesbian. All the clips were about them making out, and they were singing some songs about homosexual relationship. And it was a big thing in 2000. I remember they were big when you had Britney Spears, And Britney, she was the image of that girl, that she was a virgin and she was waiting for that special prince guy, saving herself, something like that. I mean, that was the image of Britney back then in 2000. And we had these two lesbian girls making out on the scene, you know. But now, no, 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 no. Everything about LGBTQ is strictly prohibited in Russia. And I have some gay friends from Russia, and they have to pretend to be straight people. They cannot, you know, put themselves out there to be what they are. So I don't know. It's just crazy. I don't know. As I think it's kind of North Korea there. I haven't been to North Korea. I haven't been, but to me, what's happening in Russia, I think is we're, you know, moving towards North Korea there.
Erkan, do you have anything you'd like to ask, or do you have anything that's come to mind?
I wonder what you think it's going to take to bring that regime down, or if anything can. I mean, to end, you know, to end this chain of command and this, like you say, this what you dread coming next. Maybe he could be even worse than Putin. Can anything break up this legacy?
Well, that's a very good question, though. I think if at some point a leader like Navalny, like someone younger, someone 30-something, 40-something, could get in power, someone who traveled, someone who speaks the languages, someone who corresponds to the world, you know, things like, I don't know, sustainability, like thinking about not only about this piece of land, maybe, you know, at some points it could get changed. So it's not only, I know it's quite popular in my country to say, I mean, the opposition thinking people say, well, it's because of us, it's because Russians, we are motherfuckers, we just want to follow the leader. At some points that's truth, but it's like 50% of responsibility. But also what is going on there? Like, why these guys, they just want to just get richer and richer, all those oligarchs, they just take care of themselves and they do not think of tomorrow. They do not even think of their own kids. Like today, what happened? They lost all the money. All the money are arrested somewhere abroad. And like they cannot give this benefit to their kids. So that means that the mentality was, I live today good. I don't care what's going to happen tomorrow. So this mentality should be changed.
Yeah, it's amazing how rich people, even in the West, think that it's the height of patriotism and loyalty to suffer if you're a normal poor working class person. But you know, you try taking any of that money away from the oligarchs and you'll see, you know, there'll be a reaction. You know, it's like, but they expect poor people, they expect poor people to just get on with it. You know, it's just double standard.
Well, it's like how, I don't know how it is I imagine in Russia it's the same, but one thing that's interesting about whether it's the Chinese regime and the Chinese uber elites, uber rich, is that a lot, you know, in public, let's say like in China, the emphasis is on total and unquestioned nationalism, right? Whether especially if you're at the top. And yet a lot of the leaders in China, or even, I don't even mean just political leaders or important political people, but almost all of them send their children and their money abroad. You know, very few keep their money in China and keep their children in China. Like if they have a chance to either send their kid to Peking University or Harvard, they're going with Harvard. And that's the thing you see in a lot of countries, you know, but it is kind of like armchair patriotism, you know, recliner patriotism, where, you know, someone at the top will be waving the flag, but they don't do any of the sacrifice, right? I mean, there was that famous image early in the war in Ukraine where the daughter of a Russian oligarch posted a picture to Instagram where she was in some luxury Dubai hotel, and it was kind of a rah, we're gonna win this war, as she spends oligarch money in Dubai. So there is that disconnect between, right? Like it's just like there's that disconnect between, let's say, the oligarch's children are in Dubai, or they're in Monaco, or they're in London, but someone from a poor family in Siberia has just been conscripted to go fight in Ukraine with a substandard tank, a lack of ammo, and a lack of supplies. So, I mean, that's kind of, it's to varying degrees, right? It's to varying degrees by country, but this is a common reality in the world we live in. Because you even think about in the U.S. how in World War II, everyone served, rich served, poor served, and I remember reading about the campaign in Italy, and I believe in one graduating class, almost all the men who went to Princeton enlisted in the military and went to fight in combat. I mean, that today, that would never happen. If there was a conflict in between America and Taiwan and China, the top grads of the rowing team and the polo teams at Harvard and Yale are not going to say, you know what, I've given up Wall Street, give me a flak jacket and Kevlar, and I'm ready to go. So, I mean, that's more and more common, I think, in the times we live in.
Was it ancient Athens? You correct me if I'm wrong. Was it ancient Athens where they actually, when they voted on war, they knew they were going to be sending one of their own? I think it was the case. I might be getting the wrong. It might not be Athens, but I think there was one of the cities, ancient Greek cities, city-states, where this was the deal. It's like, you will be sending one of your own. So you take it much more seriously, because it's not out there someplace else. It's not somebody else's problem. It's your problem too. So there's buy-in, there's skin in the game, as the saying goes. And I think that's a little bit what you're talking about, Kevin. There's not really that skin in the game.
No, there's not. And that's why nowadays, like when someone in Congress or the Senate, if one of their kids serves in the infantry, it's like, wow, you're giving up all that money and opportunity to go get shot at. Like it's kind of an admirable thing, or like a surprising, right? It's just so unheard of. So, but like, let me ask you this. This is something I want to ask you, Dina. Have regular Russians, like everyday Russians like yourself that you know in Europe, have they been affected financially by the sanctions on the banks?
Of course, I cannot sustain my Apple because all my cards are blocked. And I don't know how to send the money to my parents because I cannot use the Western Union. I still have my Italian bank account, but it's kind of like it's just a debit card, and I cannot use it to send money. So, I mean, I'm not an oligarch, obviously, so I don't have those millions euros on my bank accounts, just some small amounts of money. But I feel quite disabled, like I don't know how to do that. I think it's a bit too much, like very severe. It's very severe, those kind of sanctions.
When the war kicked off and you were in your hometown, like, did you know right away, hey, I got to get out of here? Or were you still on the fence about leaving just because, your family's there, your parents, your and so forth?
It was just painful, because like my fiance is Italian, and I already chosen the path that I'm going to settle down here. I'm going to marry here and have or adopt a child here. So I knew that like I'm going to live in Italy, not in Russia. This decision was taken like a long time ago, not today. But when the war started, I was just, you know, like numb. I just freeze. I didn't know what to do. And Vito got panicked because he's Italian. He's very impressive. Let's say, like, oh, too much, not impressive, expressive. And yeah, he started calling me like, you should get back here. Like, I'm worried. Don't stay there. What if, you know, the war starts in your hometown? And I got panicked. I got kind of panic attack. So, okay, I have the residence permit, the European one. So I just took the flight and back to Italy. But of course, I'm worried a lot. What if it's going to be the mobilization? And my brother is there and he's 38. So, but it's not that much what I can do. You know what? I just work. I do my things. I try to support Ukrainian people the way I am able to. I'm trying to speak to my students. I'm doing kind of podcasts or something just to speak out that not all the Russians do support this war. And I'm just trying to do what I can do. That's my answer, let's say.
Do you mind if I actually ask a question of all three of you? Because this
Yeah.
is something where so correct me if I'm wrong, all three of you have spent time in China, correct?
Me?
All of us.
All three of you, and I have not. I briefly, I was in Russia in '94 for like a whole week, a little bit of time in Moscow, a little bit of time in St. Petersburg, spent some time in some other Eastern European countries, Poland, Lithuania, etc. But I've never been to China. So my question is kind of a two-parter. Do you think that Russia might begin to pivot more towards China and or India or other parts of Asia in its mindset and its strategic alliances? Do you think that's a possibility going forward? And if so, what could that look like? What might that look like for Russia or for the world more generally?
Kevin?
I think we could start with Erkan.
Sorry. So the question was, will they become stronger allies, or will they?
Yes, and maybe, you know, there's been, of course, a tension there in the past. Obviously, we know between Russia and China, there's been some significant tensions in the past. Do you believe that they might start looking more towards each other, or not? And if they do, what might that look like? Of course, China's a huge economy, a huge power, arguably a bigger one than Russia is at the moment. What do you think that might look like if they were to do it? And is that even a realistic possibility or not?
Well, I mean, I've read other people's opinions on this kind of question, which is, I mean, it's like, will China see it as an opportunity to kind of swallow up? Swallow up bits of Russia. I mean, not militarily, but just effectively, kind of, like China's doing around the world. It's, buying up parts of Africa, property, land, and all the rest, and putting people into debt traps to serve the Chinese population. And so some people have asked that question: is it an opportunity for China because Russia's on its knees? Will they see it as yet another opportunity to grow? And yeah, I don't know. But the answer is, I'm not sure.
I don't.
One thing that really, let me just jump in here real quick. One thing that blew me away when this war kicked off, just from Chinese social media, from my own experiences, right, was how emotionally invested some Chinese people I knew were in the Russian narrative of what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, I got deleted by some people who were like, I believe in Russia, I believe in Putin.
Yeah.
They're defeating Nazis, and I just was blown. And these are some like next generation Chinese bureaucrats, middle upper class, one studying abroad. And I just, for me, I've never gotten that emotional about another country's propaganda. And you know what I mean? I've never gotten that caught up. Like if Britain was fighting someone, even if I'm kind of on their side, if someone doesn't like Britain, I'm not going to start deleting people and being mad that they don't like Britain. I'm just going to go on with my life. And I remember just the amount, I think it's like this. I could see maybe China does go with pull some Belt and Road Initiative tricks out of the bag for Russia and say, hey, you know what? You need help with that dock, don't you? You need help with your port. You don't have any money. Well, how about we buy 50% of your port and you pay us back? I mean, I could see that. I could see that definitely. Some joint projects, and I could see China loaning some money to Russia. But it already kind of exists, right? I mean, there's kind of this mythologized history. Some of it is mythologized between Russia and China in terms of what's happened between the two countries, that were friends, that were allies, and so forth. I mean, you know, even going back to World War II, even though Russia or the Soviet Union didn't really do much against Japan, I mean, it was like 90% US military power, but somehow, you know, like, but what I want to say is I could see more and more of this alternative bloc, trade bloc. And you have already seen that with India too. India is buying, I think India is buying some of, has agreed to buy some Russian oil in rubles.
Yeah, it does.
And so, but like I said, I just wonder, you know, how far will that alliance go? How much of it is just going to be propaganda, but no weight? Because at the same time, like the US-Chinese relationship, I mean, we're the biggest trading partners in the world. I mean, and Russia cannot make up the difference of the American trade power. So, and I think wasn't there, I think there was a news story recently where the US was threatening China that if they helped Russia, if they got involved too much in Ukraine, that the US was going to start sanctioning some people in China. But I could see overall, I could see more of an alliance, but I don't think it's going to be militarily like potent. I think economically it's going to be, it could be kind of a forceful thing. And I could see, to reiterate, I think China could become Russia's bank, or, you know, that could, when they need money, when they need financing for projects, say China will provide it, and they'll form some sort of investment partnership. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dina.
I don't want to be rude, but I'm kind of running out of time because I'm in Paris and I have a flight at night.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. You've been very gracious.
4.5, and I still need to pack the
Okay.
luggage.
Well, thank you so much for coming. And I think
No,
coming
thank you.
on.
It's been a pleasure to meet all of you. You're all so intelligent. I hope you know what, you should come to Rome. I'm gonna give you the tour. I work business in Rome.
I know.
Thank
You know
you.
what?
Yeah, Kevin, you share
Yeah.
me with the gentleman so we can follow each other, and in case your guys come to Italy or Europe, I might be useful, I might be helpful.
Well,
you know.
even Vito, I got a message from Vito, and he said, "Kevin, you got to come here for a week." And I was like, "Man,
Yeah,
Rome
you
for a
should.
week sounds very nice." Well, thank you so much for
Dina.
coming on, and it's been
Dina, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
So we can follow each other.
all right. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Dina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you, Dina.
Bye. Bye.
What'd you think?
Went well. I think it went well.
Yeah,
I thought
we
It
covered a
makes me
lot of good
excited.
ground.
I think it makes me excited for, you know, future guests,
Yeah.
because it was a good mix. We all had
That's
different
not
angles.
bad. That's not bad for a first one, for sure.
Mm.
is me. I know. All right, what sport am I playing, guys? Right here.
Basketball.
Baseball. That was a home run right there.
Basketball. Remember?
You know
Yeah,
what? I
baseball.
could see, I could see poor Dina looking at her watch, you know, and I kept seeing like she was checking it, and I thought maybe we should wrap it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you were getting my message. No, I didn't want you guys to think that I was looking at the time, because I'm not. You know, I'm fine. I'm okay for time, but I was watching Dina.
When did
keeps
she
on-
start looking? Like towards the end, or?
Yeah, she kept on checking like 10, 15 minutes
Yeah.
ago. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
My bad. I just